Picture this: you're the weakest kid in a galaxy full of bullies. Every alien species looks at humanity and sees soft, pink creatures who can barely survive their own planet's weather without artificial coverings. They see beings who take decades to mature, who die from their own diseases, who fight each other over imaginary lines on maps. To the galaxy, humans are the cosmic joke, a species so pathetic that they need machines to fly, technology to see in the dark, and tools to hunt prey that should be easy kills. The Galactic Council doesn't even invite Earth to the important meetings. Why would they? Humans are just another primitive species that will probably extinct itself before reaching true spacefaring status. But here's what those aliens don't understand about the weakest species in the galaxy: we didn't climb to the top of Earth's food chain because we were the biggest, fastest, or strongest. We got there because we were the most terrifying hunters the universe has ever produced. We just forgot to mention that small detail when we introduced ourselves to our new cosmic neighbors. Now, as the galaxy's greatest threat emerges from the dark void between stars, those same aliens who mocked humanity are about to learn a hard truth: when you're facing extinction, you don't call the strongest species for help. You call the most dangerous one. And humanity? We've been dangerous since we first sharpened a stick and decided that mammoth looked tasty. The laughter echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chamber, a sound that would have been beautiful if it weren't so cruel. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the massive circular room, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering representatives of dozens of alien species. The Crothery delegate, a reptilian giant standing nearly 12 feet tall, was practically doubled over with amusement. "Humans want to join our military alliance," the Crothery wheezed between laughs, his scales rippling with each chuckle. "The species that needs artificial coverings to survive their own planet's temperature variations?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. The insectoid Zeks clicked their mandibles, and what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of snickering. Even the usually diplomatic Etherians, beings of pure energy contained within crystalline bodies, pulsed with amused light patterns. Sarah kept her face neutral, though inside she felt the familiar burn of frustration. 6 months she'd been here, 6 months of presentations, demonstrations, and formal requests. 6 months of being treated like a child asking to sit at the adult table. "Esteemed delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic design, "humanity has successfully defended our homeworld from multiple threats. We've developed advanced technology, established colonies on 17 different worlds, and our military has a perfect record in defensive operations." "Defensive operations against what?" scoffed the Vorthak representative, a being that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. "Your own species? We've seen your historical records, human. You spend more time fighting each other than any external threats." "Because we've eliminated all external threats on our world," Sarah replied evenly. This brought fresh waves of laughter. The Galathene delegate, a graceful creature with 6 arms and skin that shifted colors with her emotions, gestured dismissively. "You eliminated threats like what? Small predators? Weather patterns? Your homeworld is classified as a Class 7 death world by our standards, barely above garden worlds in terms of danger." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. Earth was classified as a death world by galactic standards, true, but apparently not deadly enough to earn respect. What the aliens didn't understand was why it was classified that way, or what it meant that humans had not just survived there, but thrived. "The answer is still no, human," declared Korthak the Mighty, the Crothery Supreme General who served as the Alliance's military commander. His species was legendary for their warrior culture, their natural armor plating, and their ability to survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. "The Galactic Defense Alliance is for species that can actually contribute to galactic security. We don't need another species that requires environmental suits for most worlds and dies if they don't consume nutrients every few hours." "Every few hours?" Sarah questioned. "Your species requires sustenance approximately every 4 to 6 hours, according to our biological assessments," the Zeks delegate chittered. "Most civilized species can survive weeks without feeding. Your metabolisms are ridiculously overactive." Sarah almost smiled at that. If only they knew why human metabolisms were so overactive compared to theirs. But she kept that information to herself, just as humanity had kept many things to themselves since making first contact 3 years ago. Furthermore, Korthak continued, your species lacks any natural defenses. No armor plating, no natural weapons, no toxic secretions, no ability to survive in hostile environments without technology. You're essentially prey animals that learn to use tools. The chamber erupted in agreement. Sarah looked around at the assembled species, each one representing civilizations that had mastered spaceflight, energy manipulation, and technologies beyond current human understanding. The Crothery with their natural armor and incredible strength. The Zeks with their hive minds and ability to survive in near-vacuum conditions. The Vorthak with their photosynthetic biology that made them nearly self-sufficient. The Etherians who existed as pure energy and could travel through space unprotected. And then, there were humans. Soft, vulnerable humans who needed spacesuits and regular meals and died if the temperature dropped too far or rose too high. Humans who took decades to mature instead of the months or years most species required. Humans who couldn't survive their own planet without tools and technology. We understand your concerns, Sarah said finally. But, we believe humanity has unique qualities that could benefit the Alliance. Such as? Korthak challenged. Adaptability. Persistence. Creative problem solving under pressure. The Crothery general's laugh was like grinding stone. Adaptability? Human, the Zeks can survive in environments ranging from near absolute zero to temperatures that would melt most metals. The Galathene can breathe 17 different atmospheric compositions. The Vorthak can photosynthesize energy from 14 different stellar classifications. What can humans adapt to that requires any skill? We can adapt to hunting anything, Sarah said quietly. The laughter died down slightly. Hunting, the Etherian delegate pulsed in confused patterns. You mean gathering resources? Most species evolved past such primitive behavior millennia ago. No, Sarah replied, her voice still calm but carrying something that made a few delegates shift uncomfortably. I mean hunting. Tracking prey across impossible terrain for days or weeks until it collapses from exhaustion. Learning the patterns of creatures that have never seen our species before and finding their weaknesses. Taking down prey dozens of times our size using nothing but persistence and intelligence. Primitive, scoffed the Vorthak. We evolved past such barbarism long ago. Civilized species create their nutrition through technological means or biological processes. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, you evolved past it. That's exactly the point. Before anyone could ask what she meant by that, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. The lights shifted to a harsh red warning pattern, and the chamber's central display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Emergency session called to order, announced the chamber's AI system. Priority Alpha threat detected. All delegates maintain positions for crisis briefing. Korthak immediately took command, his massive form moving with surprising grace to the chamber's tactical station. Report, he barked. The display zoomed in on the galaxy's outer rim, showing a sector that had been empty in the last update. Now it showed something that made several delegates step back in obvious fear. A massive dark shape, easily the size of a small moon, was moving through space at incredible speed. But that wasn't the frightening part. The frightening part was what followed behind it. Hundreds of smaller shapes, each one easily the size of a large space station, moved in perfect formation behind the massive lead vessel. As the display updated with more sensor data, the shapes became clearer. They were organic, covered in what looked like chitinous armor, with massive weapons that seemed to be grown rather than built. Devourers, whispered the Galathene delegate, her skin shifting to deep purple with fear. The chamber fell silent except for the continued blaring of alarms. Sarah had never heard of the Devourers, but the name and the reaction of every alien in the room told her everything she needed to know. I thought they were a myth, chittered one of the Zeks representatives. Myths don't show up on long-range sensors, Korthak growled, though even his voice had lost some of its usual confidence. Computer, analysis of the threat. Scanning, the AI responded. Warning: sensor data indicates biological vessels utilizing unknown propulsion technology. Energy signatures suggest weapons capable of planetary sterilization. Fleet composition: 1 capital-class organism approximately 12 kilometers in length, 437 cruiser-class organisms averaging 2 kilometers in length. All vessels show signs of adaptive biological armor and what appear to be breeding chambers. Breeding chambers? Sarah asked. The Etherian delegate's light patterns shifted to rapid, panicked pulses. The Devourers don't just destroy civilizations. They consume them. They use the biological material to breed more of themselves. Every world they take makes their fleet larger. They're heading for the Kepler sector, Korthak announced after studying the tactical display. 7 inhabited worlds, including the Galathine colony of New Paradise and the Zex manufacturing world of Hive 7. Total population, approximately 4.3 billion sentient beings. How long until they reach the sector? The Vorthak delegate asked, his branching limbs trembling slightly. At current speed, 47 hours. We have to evacuate, the Galathine representative said immediately. Get the civilian populations off-world before they arrive. With what ships? Korthak demanded. It would take weeks to evacuate even one of those worlds, let alone 7. And where would we take them? If the Devourers are back, nowhere in the galaxy is safe. Then, we fight, declared one of the younger Krothari delegates. The chamber fell silent again. Everyone looked at Korthak, waiting for the military commander's assessment. The ancient warrior studied the display for long minutes before responding. Our intelligence suggests the Devourers were defeated once before, approximately 50,000 years ago, by a coalition of species that no longer exist. The few records we have indicated required sacrifice on an unprecedented scale. Entire species chose extinction rather than allow the Devourers to continue their consumption of the galaxy. So what are you saying? Sarah asked. Korthak turned to face the assembly, his reptilian features grim. I'm saying our conventional military forces are insufficient for this threat. The Devourers don't just have superior numbers and firepower. They adapt. Every battle they fight, they learn from. Every species they consume, they gain new capabilities. Fighting them with standard tactics is suicide. Then, what do we do? The Etherian delegate pulsed frantically. We need a species that specializes in fighting things that seem impossible to defeat, Korthak said slowly, his eyes scanning the assembled delegates before settling on Sarah. We need hunters. The chamber remained silent as the implication sank in. All those months of mockery, all the dismissal of humanity as weak and primitive, and now the most powerful military commander in the galaxy was suggesting they needed exactly what humans had offered. Sarah felt a cold smile tug at the corner of her mouth. Are you asking humanity to join your military alliance, General Korthak? The massive Krothari's jaw worked silently for several moments. Around the chamber, delegates who had been laughing at humanity just minutes before now watched with growing understanding. The weak species that needed environmental suits and regular meals. The primitive species that still understood hunting. I'm asking humanity to save the galaxy, Korthak finally admitted. Sarah's smile grew wider, though it wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. Well then, General, I suppose you're about to learn why humans became the apex predators on a death world. And why we never stopped being apex predators, even after we learned to build starships. She activated her communication device, sending a priority signal back to Earth. This is Ambassador Chan to Terran Command. Request immediate deployment of the Hunter fleet. We have prey to track. As alarms continued to blare and alien delegates struggled to process their rapid change in circumstances, Sarah looked up at the tactical display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Council, she felt truly comfortable. After all, humanity had been preparing for this kind of hunt for their entire evolutionary history. They just hadn't expected their prey to come from space. The Terran Hunter fleet arrived at the Galactic Council's emergency staging area 18 hours later, and the sight of it made several alien delegates question everything they thought they knew about humanity. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the council station alongside Korthak and the other military commanders, watching as human vessels emerged from hyperspace. They didn't arrive in the neat, organized formations typical of galactic militaries. Instead, they seemed to drift in randomly, each ship taking a different approach vector, maintaining varying distances from each other and the station.
This is their military formation? Korthak rumbled, his reptilian features showing confusion.
It looks like chaos. That's because you're thinking like prey, Admiral Marcus Torres said as he materialized on the deck via transport beam. The human military commander was unremarkable by galactic standards, average height, no visible natural weapons or armor, wearing what appeared to be simple cloth and metal coverings. But something about his presence made the alien commanders unconsciously step back slightly.
Explain, Korthak demanded, though his tone was more respectful than it had been with any human before. Torres gestured toward the viewports where the human fleet continued its seemingly random approach.
Prey travels in herds for protection. They bunch together, move in predictable patterns, rely on the group for safety.
Predators hunt alone or in small packs. We spread out, approach from multiple angles, stay unpredictable.
But military doctrine requires coordination, protested the Zex Hive commander, her compound eyes tracking the scattered human vessels.
How do you maintain unit cohesion without standard formations?
The same way a pack of wolves coordinates without radio communication, Torres replied. We've been hunting together as a species for 200,000 years. We don't need rigid formations to know what each other is thinking.
As if to demonstrate his point, the scattered human ships began moving in what initially appeared to be random directions. But, within minutes, a pattern emerged that made the alien observers lean forward with interest.
Without any visible communication signals, the human vessels were positioning themselves in a complex three-dimensional web around the staging area, each ship covering specific approach vectors while maintaining clear lines of retreat. How are they coordinating without communication? The Etherian military coordinator pulsed in bewildered patterns. They are communicating, Sarah said, pointing to subtle variations in the ship's engine signatures and positional microadjustments.
Just not the way most species do. Humans developed complex nonverbal communication during our evolutionary development.
We can coordinate pack behavior through minimal signals that most species wouldn't even recognize as communication. Torres activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation. The Devourer fleet had entered the outer sensor range of the Kepler sector, and their behavior was becoming clearer. The massive capital organism was indeed at the center, surrounded by the smaller cruiser-class creatures in a perfect sphere formation.
Standard galactic military doctrine would suggest a frontal assault with maximum firepower concentration, Korthak observed.
Standard galactic military doctrine assumes you're fighting an intelligent enemy using technology, Torres replied.
But, look at their formation. Look at their approach vector. Look at their speed.
The alien commanders studied the display more carefully. The Devourer fleet was approaching the first inhabited world in the sector at steady velocity, maintaining perfect formation, showing no signs of tactical awareness or defensive positioning. They're not acting like a military force, the Galactic commander realized, her skin shifting to surprised yellow patterns.
They're acting like animals following an instinct, Torres finished. Because that's exactly what they are.
Yes, they're spacefaring biological entities with incredible destructive capabilities.
But, they're still animals. And, humans have been hunting animals for our entire evolutionary history. Torres expanded the tactical display to show the entire Kepler sector.
The Devourers are following the most efficient path from world to world, planning to consume each inhabited planet in sequence. It's logical, methodical, and completely predictable once you understand their behavior pattern.
So what do you propose?
Korthak asked.
We don't fight them, Torres said simply. We hunt them.
The alien commanders exchanged confused glances. The Zex Hive commander clicked her mandibles nervously. Admiral Torres, the Devourers are heading for worlds with billions of inhabitants.
We cannot simply allow them to proceed.
We're not going to allow them to proceed, Torres replied. But, we're also not going to meet them head-on in a battle we can't win.
Instead, we're going to use the oldest hunting technique in human history. We're going to make them come to us.
Torres manipulated the display, highlighting specific locations throughout the sector.
Humans learned long ago that the most efficient way to hunt dangerous prey isn't to chase it.
It's to understand what it wants and make sure it comes to you under circumstances that favor the hunter rather than the prey. You want to use the inhabited worlds as bait, Korthak said slowly.
No, Sarah interjected firmly.
We're going to evacuate the inhabited worlds and use them as bait.
There's a difference. Torres nodded agreement.
The devourers are drawn to biological material. They need it to reproduce and grow their fleet. But they're following their instincts, which means they're predictable. We evacuate the populations to safe zones, then create false biological signatures that will draw them exactly where we want them.
And where is that? The Etherian coordinator asked. Torres smiled, and several alien delegates found themselves stepping back again. It wasn't a pleasant expression.
Into the biggest trap our species has ever constructed.
Over the next 6 hours, Sarah watched humanity demonstrate why they had become Earth's apex predator.
The evacuation of 7 worlds, a task that galactic military doctrine said would take weeks, was accomplished in less than 30 hours through methods that bordered on the impossible.
Human ships didn't dock at space stations or follow standard evacuation protocols.
Instead, they spread throughout each world's atmosphere and began extracting population centers using rapid deployment transport systems that could lift entire city blocks at once. Rather than trying to process refugees through normal channels, they simply grabbed everyone and everything and sorted out the details later. How are they moving so fast? The Galactic evacuation coordinator asked, watching human ships work with mechanical precision throughout the sector.
Our logistics computers say this should be impossible.
Because your logistics computers are designed for standard military operations, Sarah explained.
Humans developed these techniques for hunting migratory animals. When prey is on the move, you have to be faster and more efficient than they are, or you don't eat. What impressed the alien observers even more was how the human civilian populations reacted to the emergency evacuation.
There was no panic, no resistance to leaving their homes, no demands for explanations or guarantees.
Entire populations simply trusted their military and did exactly what they were told with unprecedented speed and efficiency.
Why aren't they questioning the evacuation orders? The Zex coordinator chittered in confusion. Most species would demand extensive explanations and debate evacuation procedures for days before complying.
Because humans have a pack instinct, Torres explained while coordinating fleet movements.
When the pack leaders say there's danger, the pack moves.
Questions come later, after survival is assured.
As the evacuations neared completion, Torres began implementing the second phase of the human plan. Using technology that most of the galaxy had never seen before, human ships began seeding the evacuated worlds with biological mimicry devices, machines that replicated the electromagnetic and chemical signatures of large populations while producing no actual biological material. The devourers will detect massive biological signatures from each world, Torres explained to the gathered alien commanders. But, when they arrive to begin consumption, they'll find nothing to consume.
This will force them to change their behavior pattern. How do you know they'll change their pattern?
Korthak asked.
Because they're animals, and animals have predictable responses to unexpected situations, Sarah replied.
When a predator's normal hunting behavior fails, it either abandons the hunt or becomes more aggressive and less careful.
Given what we know about the devourers, they'll choose aggressive. Which means Torres activated a new display showing the fleet positions throughout the sector.
Which means they'll abandon their methodical, planet-by-planet approach and move to attack everything at once. They'll break formation, spread out their fleet, and become vulnerable to coordinated assault. But we still don't have enough firepower to destroy their entire fleet, the Etherian coordinator pointed out. Even spread out, they significantly outnumber our combined forces.
We don't need to destroy their entire fleet, Torres said. We just need to kill the Queen.
The alien commanders stared at him.
Queen?
Korthak asked.
Sarah pulled up biological analysis data from the Devourer fleet. That massive capital organism isn't a warship. It's a breeding vessel. Analysis of its structure shows extensive biological chambers consistent with reproduction and genetic modification. It's how they create new devourers from consumed biological material. Take out the queen, and the rest of the hive becomes disorganized and eventually dies out, Torres added. It's basic pack hunting. You don't waste time fighting every member of a pack. You identify the key target and focus everything on bringing it down. But the capital organism is at the center of their formation, protected by hundreds of smaller vessels, Korthak protested. It is now, Torres agreed. But it won't be once our trap is sprung. When the devourers spread out to attack multiple targets simultaneously, the queen will be exposed. And that's when we'll demonstrate the other thing humans learned during their evolutionary development. Which is? Torres' smile was definitely predatory now. Humans are persistence hunters. We don't just chase prey until it gets tired. We chase prey until it makes mistakes. And, when it makes mistakes, we kill it. The trap was sprung exactly as Torres predicted. When the Devourer fleet reached the first evacuated world and found biological signatures but no actual organisms to consume, their behavior changed dramatically. The perfect sphere formation dissolved as individual vessels spread throughout the sector, searching for the source of the biological readings. Within hours, the methodical, coordinated force had become a scattered collection of individual hunters, each one following its own instincts to find food. The massive capital organism, no longer protected by its perfectly positioned escort fleet, found itself isolated near the sector's third planet. Now, Torres said quietly into his communications array. What happened next made several alien observers realize they had fundamentally misunderstood human warfare. The scattered human vessels, which had appeared randomly positioned throughout the sector, suddenly revealed themselves to be perfectly placed for a coordinated assault on the isolated capital organism. But they didn't attack with overwhelming firepower or advanced weapons. Instead, they began something that looked almost like harassment, quick strikes from multiple directions, each attack lasting only seconds before the attacking vessel disappeared again. What are they doing? Korthak demanded. Why aren't they using maximum firepower? Because maximum firepower would either succeed quickly or fail quickly, Sarah explained, watching the tactical display with intense focus. And if it failed, we'd have no second chance. Instead, they're doing something much more dangerous. Which is? They're teaching it to be afraid. On the display, the massive devourer capital organism was beginning to show signs of stress. Its movements became more erratic as human ships appeared and disappeared around it, delivering precise strikes to non-critical areas before vanishing again. The creature's escort vessels, spread throughout the sector chasing false biological signatures, were too far away to provide immediate assistance. Humans discovered long ago that the most dangerous prey isn't the prey that fights back, Sarah continued, her voice taking on the same predatory quality as Torres. It's the prey that panics. Because panicked prey makes mistakes. And mistakes are what turn a dangerous hunt into a successful kill. As if responding to her words, the capital organism suddenly broke from its position and began moving erratically, abandoning any pretense of tactical positioning. It was no longer behaving like a military vessel or even like an intelligent creature. It was behaving like a frightened animal. All units, Torres said calmly into his communication array, prey is panicked and isolated. Begin final approach. Remember, we only get one chance at this. The scattered human fleet began converging on the terrified capital organism from every direction simultaneously. This time, there was no harassment or hit-and-run tactics. This time, they brought everything they had. And, for the first time since arriving at the Galactic Council, Sarah felt truly proud to be human. Not because they were the strongest species in the galaxy, or the fastest, or the smartest. But, because when the galaxy's ultimate predator appeared, it turned out that humanity was exactly what the galaxy needed, a species that had never stopped being predators themselves. The final assault on the devourer capital organism was unlike anything the galactic military commanders had ever witnessed. Human vessels converged on their target not in waves or formations,
but like a pack of predators surrounding wounded prey. Each ship approached from a different angle, at a different speed, using different tactics, yet somehow maintaining perfect coordination without any apparent communication.
How are they doing this?
Korthak whispered, watching the tactical display in fascination and growing horror.
The massive Devourer Queen was threshing desperately as human ships swarmed around it, but every movement it made seemed to be anticipated and countered.
Pack instinct, Sarah replied, though her own voice was tight with concentration. When a human pack hunts together, each individual instinctively knows their role and position relative to the others.
It's not conscious coordination, it's something deeper than that.
The alien commanders watched in stunned silence as the human attack unfolded. The Devourers had been the galaxy's ultimate nightmare for 50,000 years, an unstoppable force of consumption and destruction that had wiped out entire species. But, now, surrounded by small human vessels that should have been insignificant by comparison, the massive capital organism looked vulnerable for the first time. Admiral Torres stood calmly at the tactical station, occasionally giving brief orders but mostly just watching his fleet work. There was something unsettling about his stillness, his patience as he watched the enormous creature struggle against his ships.
"Admiral," the Etherian coordinator pulsed nervously, "shouldn't you be directing the assault more actively?"
"Your vessels appear to be operating independently." "They are operating independently," Torres replied without taking his eyes off the display.
"That's how pack hunting works.
Each hunter knows their role and adapts to changing circumstances without needing constant direction from a leader."
"My job isn't to micromanage every movement, it's to know when the prey is ready for the kill strike." As if summoned by his words, the capital organism's movements began to slow. The constant harassment from human vessels had taken its toll. Massive gouges covered its chitinous surface where human weapons had found weak points in its biological armor.
More importantly, its escort fleet was still scattered throughout the sector, chasing false biological signatures and unable to return in time to help.
"Now," Torres said quietly.
The change in the human attack pattern was immediate and terrifying.
The harassment stopped. The swarming, unpredictable movements ceased.
Instead, every human vessel in the area suddenly focused on a single point on the capital organism's surface, a section that their previous attacks had identified as structurally weak.
The concentrated firepower was devastating.
In less than 30 seconds, the combined assault punched through the creature's armor and into what appeared to be its central nervous system. The massive organism convulsed once, twice, then went still.
"Target eliminated," came the calm report from the human fleet commander. "Beginning Phase 2. "Phase 2?
Korthak asked.
Torres smiled that unsettling predatory smile again.
"The escort fleet is about to realize their queen is dead.
And, when animals lose their leader, they become either completely disorganized or extremely aggressive. Given what we know about Devourers, they'll choose aggressive." He was right.
Within minutes of the capital organism's death, the scattered Devourer vessels throughout the sector began changing behavior dramatically. Instead of methodically searching for biological signatures, they began moving rapidly toward the location where their queen had died, abandoning all tactical formation or strategic thinking. "They're acting on pure instinct now," Sarah observed, watching the tactical display as hundreds of Devourer vessels converged on the human fleet's position.
"Revenge instinct.
They want to destroy whatever killed their queen, regardless of their own safety."
"Exactly," Torres agreed.
"And that's when predators become most vulnerable, when they let emotion override tactical thinking."
What happened next demonstrated the full scope of human strategic thinking.
As the Devourer escort fleet raced toward them in a blind rage, the human vessels didn't try to stand and fight. Instead, they began what could only be described as a fighting retreat, moving away from the approaching enemy while maintaining constant harassment fire. But it wasn't a panicked retreat. The human ships moved in a specific pattern, drawing the pursuing Devourers toward a particular region of space near the sector's fourth planet. A region that, the alien commanders suddenly realized, was full of the evacuation vessels containing the rescued civilian populations from the 7 worlds.
"Torres," Korthak growled dangerously, "if you're using civilians as bait, we're not using them as bait," Torres interrupted. "We're using them as motivation."
Before anyone could ask what he meant, the pursuing Devourer fleet reached the civilian evacuation zone. Immediately, their behavior changed again. The blind rage that had driven them to pursue the human military vessels was replaced by something even more dangerous: feeding instinct. The Devourers began spreading out among the evacuation vessels, preparing to consume the millions of civilians packed into the transport ships. It should have been a massacre. The civilian vessels were unarmored, unarmed, and completely defenseless against the biological weapons of the Devourer fleet. But the civilians weren't alone. Hidden throughout the evacuation zone, disguised as civilian transports and supply vessels, were the rest of the human military fleet. Ships that had been positioned there not as a retreat option, but as the final stage of an elaborate ambush. "You used your own civilians as bait," the Etherian coordinator pulsed in shock. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We used our own civilians as the reason to fight." The second human assault was nothing like the first. Where the attack on the capital organism had been methodical and patient, this attack was fast, brutal, and absolutely merciless. Human vessels emerged from concealment all around the Devourer fleet, catching them in a perfectly coordinated crossfire while they were spread out and focused on feeding rather than fighting. But, more than that, the human ships were fighting differently now. The patient pack hunting behavior was gone, replaced by something far more aggressive and violent. These weren't hunters stalking prey anymore, these were parents protecting their young. Human protective instinct, Torres explained as his fleet tore through the scattered Devourer vessels with shocking efficiency. "Threaten our civilians, and we don't just want to defeat you. We want to make sure nothing like you ever threatens them again." The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the entire Devourer fleet was destroyed, not just defeated, but completely annihilated. Not a single organism survived to escape and potentially breed new threats. The alien commanders stood in stunned silence as the human fleet regrouped around the civilian evacuation vessels. They had just watched a species they had dismissed as weak and primitive completely destroy the galaxy's most feared enemy using tactics that were simultaneously ancient and incredibly sophisticated. "I don't understand," the Zex Hive commander finally chittered. "How did humans develop such advanced tactical thinking? Your species is barely 3 years into galactic contact." "We've been developing these tactics for 200,000 years, Sarah replied quietly. "Every successful hunt, every battle for survival, every time we had to protect our families from predators that were bigger and stronger than we were. We didn't develop advanced technology first and then learn to fight. We learned to fight first, and then develop technology to make our fighting more effective." Torres was receiving reports from his fleet commanders, but he paused to address the alien observers. "Every species in the galaxy evolved past their predator stage. You became civilized, developed technology to replace biological capabilities, learned to live in harmony with your environments. That's admirable, and it's probably why you've achieved such incredible technological advancement." "And humans?" Korthak asked. "Humans never stopped being predators," Torres said simply. "We just became predators that could build starships." As the human fleet began escorting the civilian evacuation vessels back to their homeworlds, Sarah found herself alone with Korthak in the observation deck. The massive Crothery warrior was staring out at the debris field that was all that remained of the Devourer fleet. "Your species terrifies me," Korthak admitted quietly. Sarah considered that statement carefully. "Good," she said finally. "Because now you understand something important about humanity that we tried to tell you months ago, but you weren't ready to hear. Which is, we're not the weakest species in the galaxy because we need environmental suits and regular meals and tools to survive in hostile environments. We're the strongest species in the galaxy because we need those things, and we still became apex predators anyway." Korthak turned to look at her, his reptilian features showing confusion. Sarah gestured toward the viewports where human ships were carefully tending to civilian vessels and coordinating evacuation procedures with alien medical teams. "Look at them. Still taking care of everyone else even after a battle like that. Still making sure the civilians are safe and comfortable, still helping coordinate with your species' evacuation protocols, still being the cooperative, peaceful neighbors we've been since first contact." "Your point?"
My point is that this is what a species of apex predators looks like when they're not hunting.
We're not aggressive or violent by nature.
We're protective.
We're social. We're cooperative. We help other species and try to build peaceful relationships because that's what pack hunters do when there's no external threat.
Sarah's voice took on a harder edge.
But when something threatens our pack, and by pack, I mean everyone we've decided to protect, we become something else entirely.
We become the thing that other apex predators have nightmares about.
Korthak was quiet for a long moment.
The Galactic Council owes humanity an apology.
No, Sarah said firmly.
The Galactic Council owes humanity a seat at the table.
Not because we're strong, but because we're necessary. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and you need a species that understands danger intimately. You need a species that never forgot how to hunt.
And if there are no threats to hunt?
Sarah smiled, and, for the first time since meeting her, Korthak found the expression genuinely warm rather than predatory. Then, we go back to being the helpful, slightly needy species that wants to join your alliance so we can share technology and explore the galaxy together.
We're only scary when something threatens our pack.
She paused, looking out at the human fleet as they finished their evacuation assistance and began forming up for the return journey to civilized space.
But, it's important that the galaxy understands this about humanity: we will always be apex predators.
We will always be the species that knows how to hunt things that seem impossible to kill. And anyone who decides to threaten our pack, which now includes all of our galactic neighbors, will discover exactly why humans climb to the top of the food chain on a death world.
Korthak nodded slowly.
I'll make sure the Galactic Council understands.
Good, Sarah said, her smile widening. Because I'd hate for there to be any confusion about what humanity brings to this alliance. We're not just another species with useful technology or resources. What are you then?
Sarah looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of wonders and dangers that humanity was finally ready to explore alongside their new allies. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet confidence of a species that had never lost a fight that mattered.
We're the species you call when something needs to be hunted. And, in a galaxy this big, there's always something that needs to be hunted.
As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying their rescued civilians safely home, the alien commanders were left with a new understanding of their newest allies. Humanity wasn't the weakest species in the galaxy, they were potentially the most dangerous.
They just happened to also be the most protective.
And, for a galaxy that had just learned it was full of threats they couldn't handle alone, that was exactly what they needed.